Economic opportunity takeaways are anticipated from the 15th BRICS summit to be hosted by South Africa next week. Trade is one of the industries set to benefit from the event, while further plans aimed at securing long-term gains are expected to be secured. Trade and Industry Director General Lerato Mataboge speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time, Lerato. Chief, on the priority areas that the Trade and Industry Ministry is looking to target in terms of gains at this particular summit, what are they?
Thank you very much, Tumisang. Good morning to your viewers. As a department, we're very, very concerned about making sure that we grow our trade and investment relationship with the BRICS countries. We are very mindful that the BRICS countries together, outside of South Africa, they represent 27% of global GDP. Represent around 16% of global demand. So it then says that there's a lot of opportunity for us to capture for South Africa and for the African continent. So we are focusing primarily on how do we diversify our trade with the BRICS countries, particularly around making sure that our manufactured products enter BRICS economies, because right now we are still fundamentally exporting commodities, agriculture and minerals. So we are looking for value-added products and to increase the volume of exports. Number two, we are looking to see how we collaborate in terms of the digital economy and how we make sure that within that, we've got inclusivity and we are not left behind, as it were, as a country. We are also looking at making sure that our SMMEs are well positioned and put front and center in all of the conversations that we are having. So we've been working very well and strategically with the Department of Small Business Development to ensure that our conversations, both at policy level and at the action level, also include the issue of SMMEs. At the heart of it as well is about the BRIC-Africa relationship. Mm-hmm. How do we ensure that as we build global partnerships with the BRICS and many others, that those relationships anchor and center the integration agenda that we have of the African continent. So it's quite a wide agenda, as you can tell. But what we've also done is not just conversations. So we've got some strategic interventions and platforms that as a Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, we've put together, starting with, which started last week, what we call an inward buying and investment mission. What that means and entails is we brought in around 80 businesses from the BRIC countries, Brazil, India, China and Russia, to come in and look for opportunities for investments in South Africa, as well as opportunities to source from the continent, from South Africa, as it were. So we've been doing provincial visits with all these companies and facilitating business-to-business interactions. This week we are in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. We started in Gauteng as well as the Western Cape last week. And it's quite an important platform because this is where we are creating direct links between businesses. And any business that is interested could go to the DTIC website and request time, because we do have an app on our website where you can book a slot, as it were, with the delegation that is here. So that's the one. Second, on Saturday, we are opening and launching what we call the BRICS exhibition at Gallagher Estates. It's a huge exhibition where we are showcasing around 150 South African manufacturers and products, as it were. And we've also made room for around 50 stalls to showcase made in Africa products from the rest of the African continent, because if we're going to be talking about a BRIC and Africa relationship, we're also wanting to make sure that sourcing broadly from the rest of the continent is put front and center. So that exhibition will be running from the 19th until the 23rd of August. And of course, the summit itself next week, our contribution will be what we call a BRICS Business Forum, which is a by invitation only session. And there we'll be having strategic conversations really around all these issues: diversification of trade, just transition and how we collaborate, BRIC and Africa relationship. So we bring high-level government and business together from BRIC countries, from South Africa, from the rest of Africa, to really be in conversation and set the scene and the agenda for the rest of the year to say, post-chairing and chairship of South Africa, what is it that we are taking forward and what would be the role of business in all of this? And how do we as government become the enablers, as it were, because the jobs and the economic growth fundamentally happen at the level of business. So we need to be then the enablers. So it's quite a lot that we are looking to contribute, because we are quite keen to see the growth of trade and investments with the BRIC countries.
Wide-ranging, Lerato, and I'm encouraged to hear that there's action when it comes to the strategic partnerships that you would want to strike. Talk to us further about the practicality of a summit of this nature. What goes into engagements that ultimately lead to deals that would then be beneficial to the everyday South African and the economic activity in this country?
A summit of this nature is very, very important. So it's a rotational chairship. So this year, South Africa is the chair, hence the host of the summit. So annually, each BRIC member hosts a BRIC summit. And alongside that, there are numerous activities and ministerial meetings that happen even well before the summit to set the agenda, to raise issues of concern in the relationship, whether bilaterally or as a bloc. To highlight issues of barriers to trade, what regulatory changes do we need to put in place, and to really find a way to find common ground and common views in advancing business. So there's that level of government-to-government interaction that involves a lot of ministerial meetings. We had the most recent one on trade and investment happen last week as well in the lead up to summit. We then also in the architecture have what we call the BRICS Business Council, which actually celebrates 10 years this year. So quite an important milestone. So what the council does, each country has what we call a BRICS Business Council chapter, where they would represent different sectors of the economy, and the role and the facilitation of business interactions and projects and opportunities also happens very decisively. And the activities happen throughout the year. So it's not an event that happens during summit. The ministerial meetings take place, BRICS Business Council engagements take place. And of course, as you know, generally we would have bilateral relationships that continue. All of this together are to enable us to really leverage the opportunity and position our businesses. What will then happen next week at the summit is that the BRICS Business Councils will have to present a report to the heads of states to say how have they advanced the economic relationship through activating the business networks and identifying opportunities. And similarly, the ministers will be in conversation, of course, with the heads of states, the leaders, in terms of some of the regulatory issues and what has been and they've been discussing. So it's quite a busy agenda that happens literally throughout the year, because that's how important the BRIC formation is insofar as the command of the global economy. And South Africa has to be active in that formation.
Lastly, Lerato, the world economy is in a precarious environment. How strong is South Africa's position going into the 15th summit of BRICS?
We believe we're in a strong position, and not necessarily strong position because we stand alone. In a strong position because we stand on the shoulders of a continent called Africa. A continent of 1.3 billion people, a continent of 1.4 trillion GDP potentially, a continent that will contribute to the world 42% of the youth population within the next 6 years. A continent that is resource rich, both in human and commodity capital. So when we stand as South Africa in the BRIC formation and want to chart the relationship of the future, we do so with the strength of the continent that actually emboldens us to do so, the continent that we're very, very dependent on and integrated into for our own growth as a country.
Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next week at the BRICS Summit. That's Lerato Mataboge, Director General at the Trade and Industry Ministry.